So given that we're in the short run and we're a price taker, the example I gave you a very happy example where the firm was making a profit. But of course you begin to realize that whether the firm makes a profit or not kind of depends on where the revenue is in relation to the cost. So I'm going to give you 3 examples. 1, 2, 3. Imagine that all these 3 are the same cost curve, exact same one. A price-taking firm. 3 different situations. I'm going to give you one situation, which is the one we looked at before, where the price is here. I'm going to call it P1, above the average total cost curve. I'm going to give you a second situation where you're a firm and you're in a market and it doesn't have such a good price, and you're right here between the average total cost and the average variable cost. I'm going to call it P2. And then you're in a third situation here where the price is much below even the average variable cost. I'm going to call it P3. And I'm going to look at what happens in these 3 situations, because obviously if I'm making a profit I want to produce, but what if I'm making a loss? So let's take a look at these 3 situations. This one is the first one you looked at, where the price hits above the bottom of the average total cost curve. And you saw this before. This is your price. This is your profit maximizing point. You're producing Q1, let's say. There's your cost. And this little box, this is your revenue, and this is your cost. So this little box is your profit. So you will produce at A. Good. Easy peasy. What about here? Well, let's take a look at this. Marginal revenue, marginal cost. Theoretically, you should produce here. But take a look at this. This box is my revenue. Up here is my cost. This bigger box is my cost. This one. So my revenue is here and my cost is here. So in this case, the difference is a loss. When costs exceed revenues, that means you're making a loss. So should you produce? In this case, the answer is yes, because average variable cost is down here. So think of it like this. In the short run, let us say that you were hoping to open a pet store, a pet shampoo store, and so you paid a rental. You rented somebody's barber space for 6 months, 1 year, and you have to pay the rent, right? That's your fixed cost. Your fixed cost, which remember is shown as the difference between total and variable cost on average, is something you have to pay regardless. So as long as I can cover my fixed costs, I should still produce. So it's not just profit maximization, it's also cost minimization or loss minimization. Loss minimization. So supposing I paid $2,000 a month rent on this space and I'm stuck with that, can't change it, that's why it's a fixed cost. Even if I can't make full profit, if I can make enough money but maybe also plus another 500 to cover some of that rent, even if I can't pay the whole 1,500 rent, the whole 2,000 rent, at least I can pay 500 of that rent. I'll make some loss. I am making a loss. I will not in the long run. So this is why we're going to have to adjust this theory from short run to long run. I probably won't renew the lease or anything like that if I'm making a loss. So long run, I'm not going to keep doing this. So I have to figure out how I do in the long run. But in the short run, even if I'm making a loss, at least it's not as bad a loss as if I had to take on the whole $2,000 of my rental. I'm only losing $1,500. Better than losing $2,000. So as long as I can cover a portion of my fixed costs, that is, as long as I'm above that bottom of the average variable cost curve, and I am operating in that zone which shows the fixed cost between average total cost and average variable cost, I will still produce even though I'm producing at a loss in the short run. But what if I'm in P3? Down here, this is my revenue over here, this little box. All the way up there is my total cost. This is my loss. And that's a huge loss. And most importantly, its loss is so big, it does not even cover my fixed cost. So it's the difference between these two situations is if my fixed cost is 2,000 and I can recover even 500 of it, I'll still produce. But if my fixed cost is 2,000 and then on top of that, running the operation is going to cost me even more cost, and my loss will, instead of being 2,000, become 2,500, 2,700, that bigger loss. What I'll do is I'll just shut down the operation. I'll absorb my $2,000. I won't add even more losses to it. So this point right here at the bottom of the average variable cost curve, that's as far down as I'll absorb a loss. If my price falls below that, I will not. So what does that mean? What it means is if I want to generate my supply curve, if the price falls below the bottom of my average variable cost, I will not produce. All this is zero. I will not produce. I would rather just absorb the fixed cost and shut down. Once the price rises above that bottom of the average variable cost, even if I'm making a loss in this zone here, I will still produce, though I'll probably change my production practices in the long run, because I'm not going to keep on absorbing a loss. Excuse me, drop my pencil. And then here, I'm in my zone of profit. So no production, production at a loss, up to the bottom of the average total cost, and then production as a profit. So my short run supply curve, how much will the firm supply at each price? Nothing if I fall below the bottom of average variable cost. And then starting here, it'll produce along that marginal cost curve. And that is my short run supply curve for the individual firm. So this explains, if you go all the way back to our theory of supply, when I said how much will the firm supply at each price, this explains in the short run what an individual firm is doing. And then to get my market supply curve, depending on how many firms there are in the market, I will add all their supply curves. Tuck, 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 like I did all the way back then, to get my total market supply curve. So can you see now that what you've learned is the firm's profit maximizing behavior, which depends in turn on, as a price taking firm, what's the market price? Cost structures. Can I cover my fixed costs? Can I make at least a minimal loss? Even better, can I make a profit? Tuck, tuck, tuck. That's the firm's short run supply curve for an individual firm. The market supply curve will be added up across different firms.